Hello, it's Brennan Wissinger again, and today we're going to do 20 public misconceptions about climate crisis, or things that people say that sort of irk me or sort of annoy me um, as a climate activist. And I'm not talking about denialist arguments. I'm talking about other things people say, or people that don't know, or misconceptions. So, yeah, let's get started on that. First, recycling will solve the problem. Recycling is not going to save the entire earth here. Recycling isn't even recycling waste accounts for 5%, and of that, recycling isn't going to solve most of climate change. Most of it. Waste is a separate problem. It's, though, related. That hurts animals in the ocean. That contributes to more animal deaths on land and the ocean. It contributes to the loss of resources, which is not good for the planet. Recycling helps a lot because it reduces animal deaths, and it allows us to reuse the same things. So we're not pulling resources out of the ground, which is not good, because at some point we're going to run out of the resources. But recycling is not very much of a climate problem. Though plastic recycling does have some good points, though, because if you're recycling plastic, you're going to lower your emissions, because now you're not creating more chemicals from the creation of plastics, which is creates a lot of emissions. So that's a good point. That might also be somewhat true for metals. I'm not sure. But yeah. So, the second one. Let's just solve it and forget about equity. Nobody said that to me, but some people don't understand that you have to do this in a certain way. You have to do it in a manner that you have to remember equity, but people seem to think that climate activists are all just about lowering emissions. And that's not entirely true. Climate change is not just an environmental issue. It's a national security issue. It's an economic issue. It's a public health issue. It's a social justice issue. Don't know why I forgot the main word there, but it's a social justice issue as well. So the people will say, well, why is that? Well, because climate crisis hurts people that are poor, minorities, African Americans, Native Americans, disabled, elderly, children, Hispanics. The people are more, the poor and all that are more susceptible to being harmed by the climate crisis. Internally. And externally, countries that are poor, like the Democratic Republic of the Congo, or India, or Nigeria, or Mozambique, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, countries in the global south are going to be more harmed than countries in the global north, countries that are developed. One reason is because a lot of the countries in the global south are tropical, which means in tropical areas it will be hurt more. But another reason is they just don't have the resources to deal with it. They don't have the resources to build dikes and seawalls. They don't have the healthcare system to prepare for new pandemics. They don't have the healthcare system to prepare for all these different disasters. They have little housing to speak of and certainly is not prepared for hurricanes or typhoons. So they're hurt more disproportionately. And we got to think about that. And then we got to think about the people that we know when we're shutting down fossil fuel industries. We got to think, well, the workers here. We have workers that are that go in coal mines, that drill for fossil fuels and stuff like that, and we can't be punishing them. we gotta be um, giving them some type of aid, and trying to get them new jobs, trying to retrain them, trying to do whatever to make sure that the ones that are older have a good retirement. We need to be able to do that. We need to be able to remember that this isn't just about, you know, decarbonizing. It's more than that. And then you also have to remember environmentally with environmental justice. People that are communities that are African American or Hispanic or any of those are more susceptible to are more likely to have communities that are more polluted because of because of being poorer and being of the institutional racism involved. So there's a big aspect of equity when you're dealing with this. We should remember that. What about China? China is the current largest emitter. But saying, what about China, or should do nothing, why we should do it, we shouldn't do anything, why should we do anything if China isn't doing anything is wrongly founded. First, saying we shouldn't do anything because China isn't doing anything is absolutely absurd. Because, first of all, let's say you got pulled over for going 65 in a 45 mile per hour zone. You get pulled over. Cop asks you, or you tell the cop, you tell the police officer, you tell him or her, you tell him, why don't you go? Why are you giving me a ticket? Why don't you go find somebody that's going 95 miles per hour in a 45 miles per hour zone? Now, after you've said that, are you more or less likely to get a ticket? Because it doesn't matter. Both of them are emitting. Both of them are emitting, and we need to cut our emissions. It doesn't matter what anybody else does. If your apartment building is on fire and you live in one apartment, your next door neighbor isn't going out, you don't not run out of the building because your neighbor isn't running out of the building. Maybe you go to your neighbor and knock on the door and try to get him to come out and then go out of the building. But you don't just not go out of the building and continue on with your life, continue on doing whatever you're doing while your apartment is burning because your next door neighbor didn't leave. You don't do that. It's absolutely absurd. And then so China is doing stuff. China is putting a EV standard in. They're the biggest EV market in the world. They're rapidly advancing renewable energy. Well, until recently, until they started trying to crack down on people just trying to be democratic. They've been trying. They've done pretty much one of the largest replanting projects. But that doesn't mean China is perfect. Like their Road and Belt Initiative will create some more places for natural gas along the Arctic. Yay! And that's not so great. But also, the U.S. if you look at emissions per capita, per population, you look at that, the U.S. is higher than China by a lot. If you look at it that way, it's Russia, Saudi Arabia, the U.S., and some other countries that are more island countries. Australia, Canada, that you should be really concerned about, rather than China. And then people talk about India, and I'm like, we're the second largest polluter. India is the third. India is important to equity. It's not necessarily important to this. And then we have another thing that makes this argument not doesn't work. The other part is this that what is it called? Stages of economic development. The thing is, we got to allow for some other countries to transition in economic development. There are 6 stages of economic development. This is called the Rostow's stages of growth. So it goes from being a rural economy where it's mostly or agriculture, subsistence agriculture, and then it goes to some specialization, some surpluses, some infrastructure, and then from there it goes to stage 2, stage 3, industrialization and growing investment, regional growth, political change, and then the fourth, justification, innovation, less reliance on in-person investment, and then 5, consumer-oriented, durable goods flourish, commercial service sector becomes dominant, and then 5, stage 6 is pretty much where Europe is, where you emphasis on well-being rather than growth. Growth goes down, population goes down, health goes up, longer living, service sectors are more dominant than manufacturing, etc. And the thing is, so if you look at this, China's in stage 4, stage 3. We have to get them through stage 5, which is going to be difficult. The U.S. has started, hopefully, we'll exit stage 5 and enter stage 6 soon. That's another thing too, we have to remember, because of the emissions that are created during this. And we got to decarbonize them accordingly, because of the resources that are going on with this. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't consider China a developed country. But we shouldn't be doing stuff to stop China. Now, there is stuff we can do to get China to lower its emissions. We can propose a duty on things that have so much emissions involved with them. We can, or basically impose a climate duty. We can propose other types of things to try to limit the carbon dioxide emissions. Basically put a tariff on products that are produced in countries that have higher levels of greenhouse gas emissions. And there's other things we can do. We need to work with China to try to lower its emissions. We can also counteract China's Belt and Road Initiative and try to put in a green something initiative to try to counteract that. Green Belt and Road Initiative, I don't know. To try to counteract that. There's other things we can do to try to deal with China, and we should be working together to try to figure out a way out of this. So also, in negotiating trade agreements, try to make ones that actually can, that actually include environment. And then the next one is only 55% of scientists agree. Number 3. This is not true. 97% of scientists agree. And you're probably going, wait, what? 97? It's almost 100. Yes, it's pretty much the consensus is almost unanimous. And multiple studies have said this. And I'm not just talking about scientist opinion. I'm talking about research papers, too. So, and then another one. This is the one that everybody doesn't say anymore because Greta Thunberg pointed it out. But I don't know how many people actually know what she meant. And that's the one, youth climate activists give me hope. First of all, this is a misunderstanding of time. The IPCC says we have a 50% chance of staying below 1.5 degrees if we reduce our emissions by 50% by 2030 and to net zero by 2050. That is not factoring in the aspects of equity. It's underestimating just how big those positive feedback loops that encourage, like, for example, white reflective Arctic ice melts because of climate change. That show the dark absorbent sea, which absorbs more heat, increases Earth's temperature. That's a positive feedback loop. But anyways, just how big this, it doesn't count for just how big these positive feedback loops are, and it's assuming that we can pull millions of tons of, later this century, we can pull millions of tons of carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere with technology. They're still in their technological infancy. That we still can't get to do that yet. And it also says the IPC must, we also, that the special report on 1.53 resources, in addition to say that, is we have to peak emissions, we have to peak emissions pretty much this year or in the next 2 or 3 years. Pretty much it should be this year that we should be peaking emissions. And we only have 6 to 9 years of carbon budget left before we lock in 1.5 degrees. 6 to 9 years of our current rates of burning fossil fuels until we completely eliminate our carbon budget. It irritates climate activists when we say we give them hope because you're saying we have time to become a politician and run for office and win and then fix this mess ourselves. When in actuality, we should be decarbonizing right now. We don't have the time or liberty to wait and run for office and then, stuff and fix it ourselves. We don't have the time for that. A lot of us are under the age, or pretty much most of us are under the age of 25. Many of us are under the age of 18, if not most. So it sort of doesn't work. And they won't, and also another reason is that basically, another thing, a lot of times when people say youth activists give me hope, that it's more like, it's not like they actually do much. They actually do much to do something about climate change or the climate crisis. They don't do much to do stuff about the climate crisis. They don't take as much action. They're not activists themselves. They're not, and I'm not talking about being intensive. I'm talking about doing little things. A lot of times that is used as a, youth activists give me hope I need so I can not feel guilty and continue on with doing the things that I do that or that hurt the environment without feeling guilty. Or I can do, if I don't have, so I don't have to be reminded that I should lower my emissions all the time. When in actuality, you should be reminded. You should feel guilty. You should feel climate anxiety. You should feel that, because that will be just what any logical human would actually feel if they understood this. So instead of being them actually giving hope, it's more like you're shifting blame. I'm not to blame for this because of you. Well, this is not, this is, that's another thing that upsets us. And I'm not saying that, when someone's, I'm not saying if if you have climate guilt or climate anxiety that should be ignored, or you should be totally upset, debilitatingly upset, or debilitatingly guilty. But it just should be the normal response to feel some level of guilt, to feel some level of anxiety over this. It just should be the normal response. The best way to deal with that is to become an activist. Is to speak out and do activism and try to push for change, and try to do little things, just the little things, and maybe it's some big things if you are able to, and try to decarbonize. And not necessarily you will get there entirely, but just some, just some individual change. I'm not saying pushing for, and what I am saying is I'm trying to say is that it's not, and also, most people would say, and pretty much everybody said this, is older, and a lot of them won't be around very long during this time when we're around, and this will be hurting us. So it's not really their chance to be hopeful. And honestly, none of us are feeling hopeful. We're angry, not hopeful. We're angry because not not because, and this is another thing. We're angry not because the past generations, at least for me, I'm not angry because the past generations did climate change. I would have to go all the way back to the really early 1900s, and, you know, if anybody that's generation to be mad at, not these past generations. They're just continuing what that generation did. What makes me mad is we've had 30 years. We've known the science on this for 30 years. For over 30 years. We've done absolutely nothing. That's what makes me mad. That is what is bad. That is what is evil. That is what is wrong. Is that for 30 years we've known the science and we've done almost nothing about it. Actually, we've done nothing because we've done less than nothing, because we've done things to accelerate warming more than we've done things to slow down warming until recently. And of course, that's not just to put blame on, certain individuals specifically. A lot of climate activists say it's not the individuals that our parents and stuff that we're mostly mad at. It's politicians, it's corporations, it's CEOs, it's the people that do all that, because they're disproportionately the ones that have done this. So the next one, it's an ozone hole problem. It's not an ozone hole problem. The ozone hole problem and climate crisis are two separate but interconnected problems. And so the main causes of the climate crisis are carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, and methane. These three greenhouse gases. And those three are not things that put holes in the ozone layer. Well, they are greenhouse gases. So what the greenhouse effect is basically it's about these gases: carbon dioxide, water vapor, nitrous oxide, and methane. What water vapor is sort of, it goes away and comes away just on cycles, so that one's not something that will increase over time, and therefore it doesn't really matter. But the other three do increase over time if you put more of them in the atmosphere. And the point is, and those three, we're putting more in the atmosphere. Now these gases, when the sun's rays hit the earth, they're absorbed in the ground, and the ground releases that heat. And specifically at night, it releases that heat. These gases trap the infrared heat from the ground. Or infrared, no. Is it infrared, I think? Infrared energy. I think it is. Anyways, they capture it. Yeah, it is. They capture it. And then they keep it in the atmosphere, lock it in the atmosphere. And more of it, more greenhouse gases, increases the amount of infrared heat that it's trapped in the atmosphere. And that is what's causing the atmosphere, or the warming to increase. Now, when someone, now this is not necessarily this important of you to know, there's a lot of other things I would rather you know about the climate crisis, because this is just a cause, and we can not know so much, you don't need to know as much about the causes because they're not important to solving it. But, whatever. So, when, I don't think I want to get through this, but I guess I'll have to do 10 maybe. So, when the greenhouse gas level increases, so, but there are greenhouse gases that are also ozone depleters, and those are HFCs. CFCs, get the other one. CF? Anyways, those are the big ones with big long names, and the things, you know, chlorofluorocarbons and stuff like that. Those are the things that are also used to find air conditioners, refrigerators, and stuff like that. They're also greenhouse gases, in addition to ozone-depleting chemicals. So, and they're really powerful greenhouse gases. Though I don't think they last for very long. So, they don't last for very long. So that's another point. And there's not very much of them. So that's another point. So they're interconnected, but they're not the same thing. Okay. Here's one that I can't figure out where it started. I cannot figure out where it started, but it annoys the heck out of me. If you're a climate activist, please comment and say whether you've heard this or not. Climate control. I've heard this I've heard this by a bunch of people as a term for climate crisis, the climate crisis. And I'm like, where did that come from? Every time I hear it, I cringe because it's the word you use to describe your air conditioner or heating system. It could also be used to describe geoengineering. But rather than control, the climate crisis is a lack of control. And there's just also so many phrases for climate change that you could use. Climate crisis, global warming, global change, global climate change, global heating, anthropogenic warming, anthropogenic change, anthropogenic climate change, climate disruption. You could go on forever. And then for the ones we want you to use, climate crisis, climate emergency, or climate breakdown. Also could be used as ecological breakdown, ecological emergency, and you could go on and on and on in a list. It probably could go on forever. But please don't use the word climate control. Please read up on your topic enough to know the word you're supposed to be using for it. Please read up on it if you're saying that. Please, don't think I'm mad, but because I'm not. But please read up on it. If you're using that term, please read up on it. Okay, another one. Joe Biden has a good climate plan. Now, I'm not saying that Joe Biden we shouldn't vote for Joe Biden. I don't like Joe Biden, but I will vote for him because he's better than Trump, 100 times better on climate and everything else than Trump. But Joe Biden's current climate plan is not sufficient. I hope he really updates it. I mean, recently he said he was getting a bigger climate plan than he currently has, and I'm hoping his new plan is sufficient. For a climate plan to be sufficient in my book, it needs at least $6 trillion in investment. It needs to have the Just Transition Plan. It needs to have a climate justice plan. It must include investments and regulations across electricity, transport, adaptation, agriculture, research, housing and buildings, industry and manufacturing, and nature sectors. And it must include mandates for 100%, not necessarily renewable in my book, but many activist organizations want 100% renewable, but 100% clean energy, and it must include fading out new sales for fossil fuel vehicles. It must include policies to keep fossil fuels on the ground, not later this decade, but on day one of the administration, and it must include international policy and carbon pricing to have enough investments and regulations to fill carbon, it must include an international policy in carbon pricing. Or if it doesn't have carbon pricing, it must include enough investment and regulations to fill the carbon pricing's shoes. It's a long list of things. The only the climate plans that got that far in my book were Inslee's, Warren's, maybe Booker's, Harris's, only after she revised it, and Bernie's. Out of all of them, Bernie's was the one that won the most. Biden's plan is the worst of all the candidates. Oh, Andrew Yang's is pretty good too. I forgot that one. Joe Biden's plan is the worst out of all the plans that any presidential candidate this election has proposed. It has no carbon pricing. Invest only $1.5 trillion, which doesn't even have enough money really to get across the electricity sector. It has very little, if any, keep fossil fuel in the ground policies. Biden really needs to update his plans. The Sunrise Movement, which I'm a member of, is pushing him to back a Green New Deal in its policies. Basically, what Bernie's policies was, saying it will help him get the youth to vote, and independent Democrats too. And if he does, or help him get the youth vote and independent Democrats, if he doesn't get these votes, I don't know if Biden's going to win. Well, if Trump's disinfectant comment, I think, in the recent our developments, I'm not sure. I think Biden may win anyhow, but I don't know. If he doesn't do that, it'll be close. But I'm telling you, Biden really needs to get on this. Really needs to get on this. If he wants to, sure to win. And Democrats have a history of not, only going halfway to win. Not actually using all the tools in their playbook to win. That said, Trump does have a plan to destroy the entire planet as quickly as possible. And that isn't Biden's plan. Trump has done just about everything you could possibly do to try to undermine climate action. He has cut fuel economy regulations. He's even tried to undo California's fuel economy legislations. He's undone the Clean Power Plan. He has undermined New York's climate adaptation plans, threatened to not allow California and Puerto Rico to have FEMA funds, withdrawn from the Paris Agreement, has indefinitely halted the enforcement of all federal environmental regulations, has given more tax breaks to fossil fuel industries, has tried to prop up the coal industry, has appointed fossil fuel executives and lobbyists to environmental positions, appointed a Secretary of Energy that was against his own department, has silenced scientists, has tried to cut almost all of environmental spending and almost all clean energy spending, and he's even halted a UN engineering research or geoengineering research resolution. Something that climate deniers use to keep the status quo. He's gone so far that oil companies have told him to stop deregulating. When the oil companies told you to stop doing it, the people that are causing this crisis, I think you've gone way too far. And he still continued. Biden's plan doesn't do any of that. In fact, it reversed all of that. But unfortunately, we need a lot more than just reversing Trump's plan. A lot more. Like a World War II-sized mobilization more. Some people say it's hopeless. It's not hopeless. Even if we hit 1.5 degrees, we still have to avoid 2 degrees. Even if we hit that, we still have to avoid 3 degrees. There is no cliff where inaction is better than action anymore. Besides, it's completely possible to do what needs to be done to stay below 1.5 and 2 degrees. We just need to get up and pressure leaders to do so. The civil rights movement and the women's rights movement took time pressuring leaders, protesting, and using simple disobedience to get what they needed. Otherwise, policymakers wouldn't listen. People forget that Kennedy was reluctant to do anything on civil rights, or Woodrow Wilson was reluctant to do anything on women's rights. Yeah, I know it seemed hopeless, but that's why we have to stand up and fight for it. If we have a chance, a small chance, we have a chance, but a small chance, and we're going to have to fight for it. We got to accept that this is one heck of a predicament, but it's not hopeless. If you feel hopeless, I encourage you to do activism, because like Greta, she felt hopeless before striking, and many climate activists have more climate anxiety, climate depression, and whatever, including myself. So until they start doing activism, and then it gets better, I ask you to get up and join us. Thank you if you do that. So where are we? Okay. So here's a couple more. So just regulations will save us. Some people say just regulations will save us, or it will cost us too much money. Some Republicans who believe in the climate crisis have told me we can't do a carbon tax, or an investment will cost us too much money, and just regulations alone will save us. But the fact is, it won't. I mean, there's a place out there, or a climate modeling climate policy modeling simulation out there go to energyinnovation.org, I believe, and you can find it on the website. And try it out. Try it out for yourself. And it goes through a bunch of climate policies and technologies and trying to implement them. And if you just do regulations, it's not going to work. You're not going to get it. You have to combine everything, to try to get it to work. To solve the climate crisis, we need to incentivize climate action, to enable climate action, and require climate action. We need to make it we need to incentivize it so people want to do it. We need to enable it so people can do it. And we got to require it so people have to do it. Because people aren't going to do stuff if they're not required or they don't want to. We need to make sure that everyone acts on it. This is why. We need to incentivize it. We need to enable people to do it, because not everybody's going to be able to. Not everybody is able to buy an electric car or get an EV charger, and my family isn't. So we don't have enough money to. So you need to enable people to do it, because not everybody can do it, because not everybody can. So you need to do that. You need to incentivize it, because as we're seeing with COVID-19, if people are not encouraged or required to do something, there'll be a minority of people that will violate the regulations anyhow. So people don't want to do it. Some people won't do it anyways. And also, it makes it faster for people to actually do something if they want to do it. And we need to require it, because some people just won't want to do it besides the regulations. And we need to be forced to. So that requires regulations. And also, in the climate crisis, some areas have to have massive funding, because some of the technologies are pretty much unaffordable with the current technology and economics we have. And we need to make them affordable on wide scales. That requires massive amounts of funding for the government to put these things in themselves. Specifically in industry, that's going to be a big area where that's required. I'm not talking about electric cars or renewable energy. Also, carbon pricing encourages carbon sequestration in agriculture and other areas. So that is a plus. That's another plus. An investment can create millions of jobs and get our economy running again. We need to work on all paths. We've all just squandered too much time. Currently, we only have a 5% chance of staying below 1.5 degrees Celsius. So that means we need to act quickly. We have a chance, but a small chance, and that means we can't squander it. So we must use everything, every possible policy at our disposal. Everything. every possible policy at her disposal. That's how bad of a predicament we're in. And I know some people don't like that. And you don't have to like it. Not everybody liked going into World War II. But it was something that got to be done. Most of us don't like, does any of us like the restrictions for COVID-19 pandemic? No. But it's something that got to be done. Sometimes there are things in politics, and I don't think all politicians understand this. And so a lot of people in the public, people in the public, and a lot of politicians don't understand this. That don't, or at least don't seem to. Is that even in politics, you sometimes got to do things you don't want to do. It's just a fact of life, and it doesn't just apply for things outside of politics. It also applies for politics. If we don't do that, we could see, or what I'm saying is also doing all of this would improve our economy. If we don't do that, it would kill our economy. We would see a 10% drop in GDP, and it would be semi-permanent. And that's a drop bigger than the Great Depression. The costs of doing nothing are over twice as high as acting. There millions of lives would be lost. Millions of lives would be saved if we acted. At least 8 million per year. We didn't ask ourselves if we had the money during the Civil War or the Great Depression or World War II. We just said, okay, we have to deal with this. We have to solve this problem. So let's go deal with it. And then we worried about finances afterwards. That's how we have to face this. Because what's the alternative? Human extinction. And you're going to argue over, you are going to say we don't have the money to prevent human extinction? What the heck is wrong with you? The human race isn't worth saving? The concept of money is based on the human race. It's not like we'll be around to buy and sell anything after we're dead as a species. Come on. Another thing. Some people say we don't have the technologies and energy, or the technologies are still in their infancy, or the technologies are not efficient, or whatever, or they're too costly. The truth is, wind and solar are actually lower, or wind is lower in price than coal and natural gas, and solar is lower in price than coal. We do have the technology. That's the truth. Go look it up. We do have the technologies are effective. Many states, like Kansas, gets 36% of its energy from wind. Germany gets over 50% of its energy from renewables. Costa Rica gets almost 100% of its energy from renewables. So does Norway. So does Norway. What other countries do? There's a bunch of countries. Excuse me while I go get this list. So, what other states have gotten 100? So, Norway, Costa Rica, Iceland, Uruguay, and Sweden. And someone's going to tell me, oh, those are small countries. But that doesn't really matter. What that does is means the scale is going to be bigger. But that doesn't mean that the ability is going to change. In fact, a lot of those countries have higher population or have higher population densities, which may add an element of complexity to it. So, compared with the United States. And also, when you graph blackouts and brownouts, there's no actually the correlation. There's no correlation of higher renewables mean more blackouts and brownouts. In fact, it's the opposite. Now, I'm not saying that more renewables causes less brownouts and blackouts. What I am saying it, why I think that is because if you probably put more and more renewables in, you probably also invested more in your grid infrastructure. And people say, what about peaking power? Well, that can be provided by grid storage, which is up and coming, but it's still able to be put out with a large amount of investment. You can still deploy lithium-ion batteries or hydroelectric batteries, or a lot of those types of batteries. We just need a lot of investment at this current point in time for it. And also, you can also do the same in fact with a national DC grid. A direct current grid, and try to remove discrepancies from there, and that also is completely possible. China's doing it. So we think so. Just to be clear, renewable energy is to decarbonate renewable energy is completely possible without even using CCS. That's carbon capture and sequestration. Without even using that, it's completely possible. Without even nuclear, it's completely possible. Now, I think with doing out nuclear would be a mistake because it would make it a heck of a lot harder, and it's already going to be difficult. But it's certainly possible, certainly doable. It's going to be very difficult. We can't pretend as if this is normal and go on as normal. No, this is going to require a World War II size economic mobilization to deal with it. It's going to require that type of mobilization, and that will get rid of our economic depression. Is another plus, but it's going to require that level of doing to deal with this. Okay, another one. Electric vehicles are still in their infancy. This is not true either. For example, in Norway, 58% of new sales are electric vehicles, and they're increasing. Norway would probably be the only Western country to be on track with 1.5 degrees if it wasn't an oil-producing country. If you ask us what countries are on 1 point track, I think there's two. And that is the Gambia and Morocco. So let me see. So people say that electric cars are more expensive than the average gasoline car. That's completely true. The average gasoline car is $36,000. The average electric car is $55,000. Now, used, they're about the same. Used, they're pretty much the same amount. Mileage-wise, now remember, electric car mileage is different than gasoline mileage. When we talk about mileage for an electric car, it's important to note that it has to go longer on a single charge to be more viable, because usually takes a while. You can charge many electric cars have a turbocharge function where you can charge them in 15 minutes, but it's not going to completely recharge the battery. Many cars on the market are 100 and 370 miles range or mileage. For example, the Nissan Leaf, which costs $24,000 to $31,000, 226 miles. The Chevy Bolt, which costs $36,620, goes 259 miles. The Tesla Model S, which costs $74,490, goes 373 miles. And Nissan Leaf is actually a pretty affordable car. Actually, a pretty, Nissan, the Chevy Bolt and the Nissan Leaf are actually pretty good priced and pretty good mileage for that. Recharging time for an electric car, it varies. Usually it's a couple hours, but it can be done if many of them have a turbocharge function. Now, some people talk about fuel economy, and I'm like, electric car, hands down, beats a gasoline car in fuel economy. Hands down. For an electric car, it costs $4.08 to drive 100 miles. For a gasoline and for a highway, it costs $9.58 for 100 miles of highway driving. And for city, it costs $13.20 for 100 miles of city driving. And then the people mention speed, and I'm like, where did that come from? Because electric vehicles are completely capable of doing highway speeds if you don't want to race with them. But who does racing with electric? Who does racing? Who on their ordinary? Who? Not many people buy cars to race with. So the top speed of electric cars, 81 to 155 miles per hour, which is pretty similar to what a normal car is. It's completely capable of highway speeds. Most of them are above 100. And then, I don't know, I may be going, where is this coming from? Way too much, and I'm sorry if I'm insulting people. I shouldn't be doing that, but top speed, I'm sorry about that, but, so, and also, electric cars do have one advantage if you're going to race them than over gasoline cars. They have a faster startup time. So, you can quickly go from stop to go with an electric car faster than a gasoline car. Because there's no real rev up. It just starts at the normal dead speed. So, you can increase the speed, of course, to a certain speed, and that's probably better for a smoother ride, but, theoretically, you could, but that would be one advantage. If it's a short distance, the electric car might win over a gasoline car that's way more speedy because it would take longer for the gasoline car to get up to speed. Electric car would just start at that speed. So yeah. So, those were the ones I'm going to go over today. I'm going to go over some other ones later. This is a lot more than what I was expecting to do. For one, I'm going to go over we can continue normalcy, and there's two different meanings to that, two different things to that people say. And it's another one is it's some future thing. Another one is people talk about certain problems in energy, and housing, and transportation, and I'm like the problems are not or vehicle transportation, and I'm like the problems aren't in those areas. You seem to be actually ignoring where the problems actually are. And I'm going to talk about that. But it's still possible to get through these problem areas. And another one watches one currently with coronavirus pandemic. Let's take one crisis at a time. And I'm just going, this is not how it works. We're running out of time to deal with this. We need to deal with this now. Another one is coronavirus is helping nature. I'm going to talk about that, why that one's different, that one's wrong. And then another one is the climate crisis is just one issue. Another one is the world is going to end in 11 years, which is incorrect. Or, let's just plant 1 billion trees. That's not going to work. And then another one-size-fits-all solutions. Like some people say carbon pricing will bring emissions down by 90%. No, it won't. Although I'm a member of that organization, but no, it won't. And then individual solutions versus systemic solutions, which is a confrontation that's false. And then it says another one, denial is the problem. Actually, they're not. You always have the idiots in the world. Those are the ones I'm not so concerned about the deniers anymore. They're still annoying though. The Arctic Sea, and another one is the Arctic sea ice will contribute to sea level. This is a scientific one that I'll go over. And another one is, another one recently, since the planet of the humans. The problem is humans. Go back to that other one I said, what was it? The Earth, coronavirus, and nature. And then the other one is, oh my, the Paris Agreement is gone, and I'm like, Paris Agreement is great because it happened. Whether, or the Paris Agreement doesn't do much. People talk about the Paris Agreement, that's such a great thing. So it's gonna save us all, and it's like, no, it won't. So, I'll go over those tomorrow. Well, thank you for listening to me babble on about this. And we sort of get sort of brought up about it. I'll see you for our next episode tomorrow. See ya.